Wow. Thank you, Tiffany. Is Tiffany in the room, or there she is right there? I need Tiffany Trawick to stand up. This is the creator. If we can get the lights up so that everybody could see the fabulous Tiffany Trawick who put that video together. Thank you so much. It is a great pleasure and humbling experience to see so many faces in the room and to know that we have 2 overflow rooms also of people who are live streaming into this event tonight. I am just delighted and honored to be standing before you. As Anise said, I'm Dr. Lamar Hilton. I have the esteemed pleasure of serving as the Assistant Vice Provost for Student Life in the Office for Student Affairs here. And more esteemed pleasure to work very closely with Anise and her staff who are putting this grand occasion on tonight. Can we please give it up for the Multicultural Student Engagement team? I'm delighted and thankful for you all. To the Honorable Regent Dr. Abdul Omari, thank you for your time tonight. And while not a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, I'm a member of Phi Beta Sigma, but we share a similar, I see my Sigma brothers in the back, that's why I had to get that shout out in. We share the same mantra, brother, be brief. So I'm not going to be before you long. I do need to also recognize again our provost, Provost Karen Hansen. And let me just tell you a little story. When we put this Power and Privilege series, this idea to fruition, it was the provost and her office who provided the initial funding and support so that we could have experiences like this on our campus. And so I do not want that to go unnoticed and unthanked. So thank you very much, Provost Hansen, for your generosity, your support, and for being here tonight. I really, really appreciate that. I had an opportunity to speak with the man of the hour, as I like to call him, Mr. Van Jones in the back before coming out here, and I had a whole kind of thing that I was going to say and introduce him from his bio and all this goodness, and I decided that all went out of the window after I had a conversation with him. He is what our students would call dope. And that is simply the introduction that he needs. That's the only introduction he needs. He told me that if I was to acknowledge or highlight anything, he's most proud of the award from Fast Company. He's one of Fast Company's 12 most creative minds on the earth. So I will share that with you. But if you want to learn more about him, I advise you to go to vanjones.net just so you can see how dope this brother is. And he's going to bring all his dopeness to the stage tonight. And I cannot wait for you to absorb the knowledge that he will impart tonight. I ask that you be open to critically think, critically reflect, to question, ask the tough and hard questions, but also think how you might apply what you are learning here tonight to your everyday walk and to your everyday journey. So I'm about to get out of the way and introduce the incomparable Mr. Van Jones.
It's dark. I can't see him. Get the lights up. First of all, thank you. Y'all beautiful. First of all, I ain't in nobody's fraternity. When I was an undergraduate, I was so radical. I was on the left side of Pluto. And they asked me if I wanted to pledge. I said, I'm not Greek, I'm African. So they said, well, you can't come in, brother. So that's a wrap. I guess, for me, if I was going to say anything to young people today, I'd say, brother, be brilliant. Sister, be brilliant. Excellence is a weapon. You guys I'm jealous of you guys, this new generation, extraordinary generation. You guys are in the middle of probably the most historic period in American history. You would have to go back to the Civil Rights Movement or the Civil War to find a more consequential era to be a young person in. And your generation has already put itself on the map in ways that you get very little credit for. Because you see so much, because you care so much, because you refuse to accept the status quo, you are mostly frustrated, disappointed. Some of you are already burning out. How are you going to be 19 and burned out? You're doing something wrong. I'm going to tell you. It's a long walk. It's like, oh, I just can't take it. It's like, it's been 3 semesters of this crap. I mean, I just. Try 400 years. Look, I was born in 1968. Yeah, I'm that old. Look at you. That's terrible. Y'all just rude. He was like, what? Man, you hurt my feelings. We're going to have to talk afterwards, dog. But I was born in 1968. That was the year they killed Bobby Kennedy. That was the year they killed Dr. King. That's the year that a lot of young people like yourself got beaten senseless in Chicago because they wanted peace. That was the year they tried to kill hope in America. And they shot Dr. King in his face in front of his friends, 39 years old. We act like Dr. King was like 70. He was 24 in Montgomery. He was 33 on the steps of the Washington Monument. He never saw his 40th birthday. I was born that year. I'm a 9th generation American. I'm a 9th generation American. But I'm the first person in my family that was born with all my rights recognized by this government. I want to say that again. I'm a 9th generation American. My cousin Kenya was born in '65 before LBJ signed the last civil rights bill. So I'm the first person in my family that was born with all my rights. So when you hear people say, well, why do these guys keep talking about race? My God. That was like 1,000 years ago. I mean, God, get over it. You've got a black president. What do you want now? Like, jobs? I say that to say that my mother was born in segregation. My father was born in segregation. My parents were married under segregation in this country. So when you have that view, it's a long struggle. These things don't get worked out in a couple of decades, a couple of centuries worth of damage. They don't get worked out in a couple of decades. We give ourselves too much credit sometimes in America. People say, we elected a black president. You ever hear that? Every time you try to get going someplace, well, you got a black president. I don't mean to be rude, but double click on that icon and scroll down on those numbers, and you'll see something pretty shocking. The majority of white people in America voted against President Obama both times. The majority of white Californians voted against President Obama both times. The majority of white people in every state in the union, except for 4, voted against Obama both times, and one of those states was Hawaii. So we don't get a pass based on this sort of false notion that the entire country was ready for a black president. Now, it's not fair I don't want to give a false impression here that they just voted against him because he's black. I'm not saying that at all. The majority of white folks have been voting against Democrats almost since Jimmy Carter. So don't take it too far. But just back up off of it for a second and think we may have a little bit more work to go than it looks like. Now, I will say 96% of black folk voted for Obama both times. I will say that. So black people are definitely ready for a black president. That you can say. That you can say. 4% of black people got lost or confused. And the rest of us is all right. So I wanted, one second, I made some notes. Okay. So look, y'all having some problems on this campus. Let's just be honest. And since I'm not on this campus, I can say whatever I want. And I hope I say something that's constructive. And I hope I say something that challenges all of you. But I especially hope I say something that challenges the young students of color here. This is a tough environment. And it's not going to be the toughest environment you deal with. So how you deal with this environment is going to set a stage and a precedent and a pattern for how you deal with much tougher environments coming forward. And I think that sometimes folks can be too hard on students of color for bad reasons, but sometimes we can be too soft on students of color for good reasons. I had a person in my life named Willie Anthony Jones. He was my father. You can tell by his name that he was no joke. Willie Anthony Jones. My dad was no joke. My dad was born in 1944 in segregation and poverty in Memphis, Tennessee, in the biggest black ghetto in the country at that time, bigger than Harlem, Orange Mound. To get out of poverty, I got the same story a lot of y'all do. To get out of poverty, my father joined the military. Other people were running out, my dad ran in. Because when he got out of the military, he had the ability to go to a historically black college called Lane College. So my dad joined the military to be able to get out of poverty, and he put himself through college. And along the way, he married the college president's daughter, my mama, because my dad had it like that. You see, my dad was bad. So, God bless his soul. Willie was no joke. So, but he didn't stop there. When he got out, he turned around, he put his little brother through college, my Uncle Milton, who just retired from the Memphis City Police Force with every honor they have. And he put his cousin through college, my Aunt Sylvia. See, he got everybody in our family out of poverty who wanted to come. Everybody didn't want to come. But everybody who wanted to come came out on my father's back. And my father, when he died, the picture they put on the funeral program was my father standing in front of Yale Law School the day I graduated with his hands in the air. See, his family had won. He told me when I went to Yale, boy, they wouldn't even let me cut the grass at some place like Yale when I was your age. And now you're going to be with the big folks' children. He said, I'm going to tell you something. You walk around here now big-headed. And I was. He said, boy, there's only two kind of smart people in this world. He said, there's smart people that take very simple things and make them sound very complicated so they can impress everybody. And there's smart people who can take complicated stuff and make it sound simple to empower everybody. He said, when you walk back in my house, you better be that second kind of smart boy. I say that to say that my father, even though he didn't have the same privileges that many of you have, and that he gave to me, had good common sense. And so when I hit Yale in the 90s, and we were protesting and we were fighting and we were doing the things that we were doing, my father told me, and also even as an undergraduate at the University of Tennessee at Martin, my father told me something I want to tell you. I said, Daddy, you know, my campus is racist. They have all kinds of racist types of things. And I want to do something about it. And my dad said, well, that's good. But boy, get your lesson. Now that's Ebonics for study very hard. Do not allow yourself to be so distracted by your social concerns that you do not perform well academically. See, I can code switch. Boy, get your lesson. Boy, get your lesson. He said, every time you walk into a classroom, boy, somebody in there gonna get an A. It better be you. Excellence is a weapon. As long as you're getting your lesson, you can do what you want to do. The minute you stop getting your lesson, you're gonna be right back here. So the first thing I want to say to you is, your job here is to be excellent. Your job here is to be extraordinary. You have 4 years, maybe 5, where you have most of you have no small unemployed people in your house. I have 2. If you would like one, come register. Most of you have parents that are young enough that they're still healthy. Most of you are healthy yourselves. And these are years that have been set aside for you to prepare to dominate a field. Not to be the best black, female, blah, 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 to be the best, period. Excellence is a weapon. And every classroom that you are in, if you are so distracted by somebody else's bigotry and stupidity and bias and blind spots that you are not performing at your highest level, you're not letting yourself down. You're letting down all the other people who will never get on this campus, who need you. And they would be quite surprised. And Fannie Lou Hamer would be quite surprised. And Dolores Huerta would be quite surprised. And Cesar Chavez would be quite surprised to hear that you are so weak you can't deal with a bad Facebook post or a mean tweet. Yeah, you can clap for that. We'll get to the bigots later. I'm talking to you. Your worst day on this campus is better than a whole lot of people's best days. And what we have to insist with you in particular, your generation, given your size, given your level of consciousness, given what you've already achieved as a generation, is that you don't prepare just to protest, that you prepare to govern. See, it's not about you just preparing to protest. We have to insist that you prepare to govern, because the weight of your generation, the impact of your ideas, the impact of your activism is already upsetting politics in your country. Now, you may not yet appreciate what you've already achieved, but I appreciate it. Just 4 years ago, President Obama was afraid to open his mouth, to break breath, to even say that he personally approved of marriage equality. That was 2012. 4 years ago, the President of the United States was afraid and was cautious to even say that he personally approved of marriage equality. But under the massive weight of your generation's insistence, you now, just 4 years later, even the Republicans ain't complaining about marriage equality. Y'all kind of bad. I'm just saying, you have 10,000 years of oppression and nonsense, or at least 2,000 in the West, and you have swept aside. It's just not cool to be an anti-gay bigot. Occupy Wall Street, the Dreamers, Black Lives Matter, the climate fight, LGBTQ equality. These are all your generation's hallmarks, and you're already winning. Now, when you have that level of impact, there is going to be resistance. See, a lot of times you are mistaking people's reaction to your victories for oppression. Yes, you're oppressed, but you're the most dynamic, amazing, tweakinest oppressed people ever born. I mean, damn. And that is creating a reaction, and not just the United States, across the West. The Western democracies, I'm telling you like grown folk, the Western democracies, we're asking them to accept an awful lot of change. We're expecting them to accept technological change across the West, demographic change across the West, some economic dislocation across the West, cultural change on gender and sexuality across the West, a geopolitical rebalancing. China used to be a joke. It's now the rise of Asia creates a whole different set of... You're expecting these Western democracies to absorb a tremendous amount of change. Many of it, a lot of it driven by you. And they are now having a reaction. You could call it a white lash. So you have a white lash to deal with. At its hot edges, it's orange. This has to affect your strategy. You're about to govern in alliance with your allies, but you have almost already achieved a stable governing majority. Check out the vote in 2 weeks. This sister here, Tiffany, who made that beautiful video, is an African-American female. The most powerful voting bloc in the country now, African-American females. And if you don't believe it, hey, many of y'all shouldn't be clapping, you should be crying, because ask Bernie Sanders about what happens when you leave out black women in the Democratic Party. Y'all can blame Debbie if you want to. I know her. I'll blame her twice. But Sanders himself could have been the chair of the Democratic Party. And if you can't get black women, you can't get the nomination. Period. Y'all about to govern. Black, brown, young people and your allies. So you can sit up here and cry if you want to. But Mandela would have told you to prepare to govern. Put your head up. Put your shoulders back. Get your lesson. And get ready. And then from that place, can you please show some grace and some sympathy and some empathy for these people who we like to talk bad about? I'm going to be tough on you. Yes, your classmates are annoying. We'll get to them. But you're not here for them. You live in a country, if you haven't noticed, where if you are a white, male, heterosexual, middle-aged man in a red state, you might be suffering. I was just in Pennsylvania. Trump went to Gettysburg on Saturday, the site of the last Civil War, apparently trying to start another one. So Nina, I went on Sunday. And I went and I talked to Trump voters, and I was invited into the homes of Trump voters. And I sat down with them knee to knee to try to begin to build these bridges, not walls. I was in Indiana last month. Can you show some grace? Talk to a white guy there. He gets up in the morning. He's been unemployed for 6 years. Proud man, good man, hardworking man. Didn't lose his job because he was grabbing nobody by the P word. Lost his job because somebody 15 steps above him in the hierarchy made a decision to send his job to a country he never heard of. And 6 years unemployed. And every year more depressed. Every year feeling more shamed. Every year having a hard time explaining to his neighbors and the people at church what he does every day. Then he gets up and he takes his granddaughter to drop her off at the nursery. And he has to drive down streets that he remembers used to be thriving. He doesn't want factories back, they're long gone. He just wants stores. You got Blockbuster Video sitting there, empty, for years. The chains have rusted to the grate. Nobody's even opening up. Maybe we could open up something in here. grass growing up through the asphalt. And he remembers when he could be proud of his hometown and proud of his job and proud of his role. Now he's got 2 kids. One of them is on opioids, heroin, and then the good one, who he's proud of, who he saved his money and sent to school. When she comes back and sits down at the Thanksgiving table, Daddy, you're a bigot. Daddy, you're a homophobe. Daddy, you're a racist. Can't even enjoy Thanksgiving dinner. This is who you're mad at? This is who you have no love for? This is your enemy? Can you have some grace and understanding for this man? Who are you going to be when it's your turn? This is real. This is your country. No, he didn't cry for you. But hell, you didn't cry for him either. No, he didn't come to your march. But did the NAACP go to Indiana when they closed down factories and put them white boys out of work? Did the NOW? Did Greenpeace? Did any of you liberals go do anything for them? And then somebody gets on TV and says, I'm going to make America great again. That's medicine for that man. You mad he got a date? You didn't ask him out. This is what I'm calling you to. It's easy to call somebody out. At some point, you got to call people up. At some point, you got to call people to their greatness. Look, I got a bunch of stuff I ain't gonna say it. I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna sit down. Look, you're doing well. You're doing well. 2012, Democratic Party platform. After the first term of the first black president, with an Obama coalition based on 94, 96% turnout from the black community. You get the platform of the 2012 Democratic, don't talk to me about the Republicans, the Democrats didn't have one word about criminal justice reform. Not a word, not a peep, not a mumbling word. Obama's Democratic Party, 4 years in power, 2012, not a mumbling word about police brutality, not a mumbling word about police reform, not a mumbling word about mass incarceration, not a word. 4 years ago. Both political parties, mass incarceration parties, both political parties voting to build prison after prison after prison for 30 years with no force emerging to stop it at all. And then came you. Now, both political parties are wrestling with your ideas. You're mad because it hasn't stopped in a semester. The hell is wrong with y'all? You have completely changed the national conversation. After 400 years of racism and brutality and the theft of Native American lands and the theft of black labor and women being treated like garbage, you go down the whole thing. And the United States being the biggest incarcerator in the world. 1 out of every 4 people locked up anywhere on earth, locked up right here in the land of the free and the home of the brave, and nobody willing to say a word against it, not even Barack Obama, until you. You're doing well. The immigration debate, bogged down, going nowhere. President Obama walking away from it. It was the dreamers that stood up and put their lives on the line and said, deport me then, damn it, but I got to stand up for my mother, for my father, for my sister, for my brother. And broke hearts across both aisles. And now even Republicans say, well, not those children. You're doing well. The hell you want? 2011, the summer after the Tea Party took over, my beloved president pushed into a corner by these fellow citizens. And about to do his so-called grand bargain. About to buckle his knees. About to surrender. Gonna sign off on $1 trillion of cuts to working class and middle class programs because the firepower on him was so intense. And in August, they held the government hostage. And we're going to ruin the full faith and credit of America, these so-called patriots. And your president's knees started to buckle in August. And then in September, a bunch of kids went down to Wall Street and set up tents. And Occupy Wall Street within 6 weeks had completely transformed the national conversation permanently. The 99% versus the 1%. Nobody had ever heard it put that way. Up until then, if you said tax the rich, they called you a communist and you were out of office. Your generation made it cool to say tax rich folk. Hillary Clinton be up there, let's tax the rich folks. Like, how the hell you? When did you get down? They've been brutalizing students with student debt since I was a student. I still got student debt. If I had hair, my hair would be gray as your shirt. Now everybody has to talk about your issues. What is wrong with you? You're winning. But you haven't won. You haven't won. But you're winning. But now you got a character challenge. It's easy to talk about what these other students are not doing and how they're acting. But now you're about to be powerful. And that reveals character. So we're watching you. Sit up here and cry all day because somebody said something you don't like. We're watching you. Sit up here and act like every white person is your enemy. and every white man is your oppressor. Yeah? Yes and no. The truth is messy if you look for it, if you care about it. But I'll tell you this. I saw something in the past 2 weeks I've never seen, I never thought I would see after this past 18 months, past 16 months. You have a candidate. I want to tell you about your power before I sit down, especially you sisters. You have a candidate in one of the parties that many people say is a racist and a bigot and a sexist of the first order, many people say. He's a particular kind of bully in that he can't take any criticism from anybody without retaliating, in double doses. You could be a nobody beauty pageant star, and he will retaliate. Or a gold star mother, and he will retaliate. Or the President of the United States, or the Speaker of the House, or Saturday Night Live. It doesn't matter. He will retaliate. He can't help himself. He'll be up at 3 o'clock in the morning. He's like some bizarre Pokemon, gotta get him back. Except until Michelle Obama. When that sister stood up and she criticized him, not one word. Not one word. Because when you tune into your power, when you tune into your power, the oceans part. The oceans part. So, tune into your power. These little petty insults and misperceptions and misunderstandings, yes, they can be taxing. But something's happening. And it's happening through you. And it's beautiful. And it's extraordinary. And it can free not just you. You got people that need your help in Appalachia. You got people who need to get free in Indiana. You got folk who are themselves imprisoned by the same system you're trying to get free from. They just may not know it. If you do what you were born to do, if you become who I believe you are trying to become, if you give yourself the permission to be great, you can part the waters too. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, this thing is on. Hi, I'm Catherine Squires. I'm a professor in the Communication Studies Department and the director of the Race, Indigeneity, Gender, and Sexuality Studies Initiative. So great to have so many people here. And while we're gathering your questions, thank you for your very provocative comments. And I'm going to give you a question to start us off while our card gatherers are bringing in questions from the crowd. So as I was listening to you talk about this generation preparing to govern and just thinking about the work that you're doing, trying to change things around the green economy, trying to change things around a bunch of different issues that seem so intransigent. You're talking about this impatience with the pace of change, even though the conversation has changed, certainly, but with gridlock in Washington and things like this, it's hard to see the legislative wheels moving. If you were going to give advice to young people in this room about where they should seek to apply their passion, would you say, how will I make the decision between trying to change an existing institution, entering into an existing system, or trying to build something new? What questions should they ask themselves to figure out which direction they should go?
Well, first of all, if somebody asks you the question, should you work on the inside or should you work on the outside? The answer is always the same. Yes. Yes. Should you work on the inside or the outside? Yes. I've been a grassroots outsider. I've been a White House insider. I've been a target of the mainstream media. I'm now a part of the mainstream media. And it's actually the journey back and forth. I am, you may not have been aware of this, but I've been African American for a long time. I'm actually in an interracial marriage. It's moving back and forth between these different worlds that you find yourself and you find your power. The people who are usually the least effective are the ones who've only stayed on one side. If they've only been insiders, they tend to be very, very timid. They tend to be, on the inside, your career skills get very good, but your cause commitments get increasingly effaced. On the outside, your career might kind of suck, at least at first. But your cause credentials, your creativity, your scrappiness, your abilities get very heightened. And so I encourage people to go back and forth.
All right, looks like we're still gathering some cards, so I'll ask you my next question. I found it fascinating when you were talking about going to visit with people in their homes, people who are Trump supporters. And
Absolutely.
talking about being in there to build that bridge instead of that wall. So can you give us a little more detail on the kind of conversation you try to start, being black most of your life, with people who think that's not a really great thing? How do you start that conversation, and what would you say, to people who are feeling some very real intransigence and feeling some very real nervousness around trying to start that conversation?
Well, let me just say a couple things. First of all, this will sound maybe naive, but this is a democracy. In democracy, we don't have to agree. That's the whole point. Dictatorship, you have to agree. That's the whole point. Dictatorship, you have to agree. Democracy, you don't. So people sometimes ask, like, oh, I see you on TV, and Jeffrey Lord says crazy things, and you don't ever hit him. And you don't hit the crazy people on your job either. That's just how it works in America. People say crazy things. Sometimes they paint crazy things. It's just, so my fundamental view about this is that it's a democracy. And I also have another view about the left and the right, which is that we need each other. People say, what do you say to the Trump voters? Well, at first we fuss and fight about a whole bunch of stuff because they say a bunch of stuff I think is crazy, and then I say stuff they think I'm crazy. But at the end, I always say the same thing, which is that I need you. I need you. You think I'm mad at you because I hate you. You think I'm mad at you because I want to, call you a bunch of bad names. I'm mad at you because I need you. I can't have the country I want for my kids without you. And part of the reason that I'm probably the most left-wing person on television, but my Q score with Republicans is very high. And I think it's because I fundamentally have a great deal of respect for the role that the right wing plays in the country. Let me just take a second. I think this is worth explaining to people. When you're a kid, if you went to most schools, you had to say the Pledge of Allegiance. And there's this line that says, with liberty and justice for all. This is a very strange line. Liberty and justice do not fit easily in the same sentence. Liberty is where the right wing feels very comfortable. Limited government, individual rights, a real bias toward the market. Liberty. Justice is really where the left feels more comfortable. It's concern about what about big groups running over little groups? Who's going to be left in? Who's going to be left out? The right wing, with their liberty hat on, asks very important questions in the country. First of all, they ask, should the government be doing this in the first dadgum place? That's actually a very good question. Maybe it would be better left to families or individuals or communities or the market. Why the heck do you want the government to do this in the first place? That's a very good question. Second, how much does it cost and who's going to pay for it? You ever go out to eat? That's a very good question. How much does this cost and who's paying for it? These are good questions from the right. Now, the left, we ask good questions too. We ask, okay, fine. We get your market stuff, but can you have a great country doing only what corporations can make money off of? Can you have a great country doing only the things that corporations can make a big profit off of? And what about the people who are going to be left out or hurt? Those are good questions. So if both sides are playing their role properly, you get thesis, antithesis, and you should be able to get to a new synthesis that's better than either side could come up with on their own. That's how it's supposed to be. Now, we've arrived at this sorry place where if somebody stands for liberty, I am going to call them a racist fascist. And if I stand for justice, they're going to call me a socialist communist race card puller. And nothing good is going to happen. So part of where I think the energetics get off is that both sides are trying to call each other out as opposed to both sides trying to call each other up. I need you, but I need you up here. I need you being the best expression of conservative principles and values, which I can honor and respect even though I reject them. And you need me to be my best version of myself, a Mandela, versus something else. So I say that to say that there's a place you can sit energetically that when people start coming at you with stuff you don't agree with, it doesn't have to feel like life or death. It can feel like a part of the process of getting to the truth, which is always messy. We're losing this on the campuses. We're losing this on the campuses, in part because we lost it in the rest of society. So this should be the last bastion but we're losing it. And we're losing it now because there are some voices on the right that are so provocative and so contemptuous, and alt-right, which I don't even know why they call it that, it's just white supremacist. Like, you know. And that is very hard to respond to well. So then you have the opposite response, which is a left that now is saying shut them down, don't even let them talk, which I think is also misguided. I'm going to say something to you guys which I hope will offend most of you. And then we'll take the next question. They won't all be this long in the answer. But let me tell you this. I don't want you to have a safe space. I'm not trying to give any aid and comfort to these horrible bigots. You should be fighting them to the last dog barks. I'm not trying to give any aid and comfort to them at all. But what I am saying is that I do not want you to have as your main goal to have some safe space. You can have a safe club. I mean, you can have a meeting and, you know, cry and pass around cookies and stuff. But to insist that the entire campus be safe for you, I object to. I think it is wrong. For you, not for these horrible bigots, for you. I don't want you to be safe, I want you to be strong. That's different. I don't want to pave the jungle for you. I want you to put on some boots. Because if we pave the jungle of this campus and make it perfectly safe for you, in 4 years or 5, you will step off of this campus and you'll be in the jungle again. And I would much rather for you to learn how to deal with it here, where you have time to process it and to conspire with your allies and to go back and forth and to write your post and the whole deal and get good here. This should be your dojo. This should be your gym. This should be your boot camp. You should bring it here because I'm not going to get fired here. Bring it here because I'm not going to lose a contract to you here. We can go toe-to-toe, one-on-one here. You say your crazy thing, I say mine here. I don't want you to be safe. I want you to be strong. And if you go to the gym and they take all the weights out because they want to make sure you have a nice experience, get your fees back.
But we have a lot of questions on this line, as you can imagine, because of recent events on campus. So I'm going to use this one to try and get you to flesh out a little bit more like what we should be doing in our dojo, to use your metaphor here. One of the folks wrote, I'm always amazed by how the expansion of rights of marginalized groups is viewed and treated as a threat. What insights do you have in dealing with people who harbor this fear? How do we fight those fears? How do we address those fears that people have that rights for so-called minorities means the end of something for so-called majorities? How do you address that?
Well, it does. It does. If you feel that your heterosexuality is so fragile, and if you feel that there's some limited number of marriage licenses and now the gay people gonna steal them all, I mean, that's apparently what they think, then you're going to experience some grief. Real grief. I'm not joking. Grief, for real grief.
But when you say, I want to bring people up, right? How do you address that person who really does believe my marriage will now mean something less because people who are gay get to be married? Or my sense of this campus means something less because people of a different color are here and not acting like they're
You have
scared
to
of me.
let them have their grief. You have to let them have their grief. People are going to grieve. You guys are wonderful people, but you're shoving a lot of change down people's throat, and thank God, keep pushing. But people aren't going to like it, and they don't have to like it. You have to beat them if they resist you. You do. You have to win. You can't sit up here and let another 1,000 years go by and have people killing themselves because they're gay. That's not acceptable. So you have to sometimes impose your will. Guess what? People impose their will on you. It's called power. But when you exercise power, people don't like it. Just grow up. Quit wanting to have everything. You want to win on your issues and have people thank you. When the hell has that ever happened? They might thank you 20 years later. Now everybody marched with Dr. King. Everybody. They won't tell you that Dr. King was at 30% approval in the black community when he was killed. They won't tell you that. They won't tell you that 2 months before he died, the New York Times denounced him. They won't tell you that. No, when you're winning, people don't like it, and they're not going to like it. So the question is, who are you going to be? And it's listen, there's a model that I have in my mind. You have to pick another one that works for you. But for me, it's always Mandela. And let me just tell you the story about Mandela because it's not told enough. When Mandela got out of prison, 27 years, he had been treated badly. Many of his comrades had been killed or driven into exile or tortured. His son, his firstborn son, died. They wouldn't let him go to the funeral. Some of you are from the motherland, you know how important those funeral rites are. His mother died. They wouldn't let him go to his mother's funeral. They banned his wife and put her in a very, very nasty place and situation for years. So when he got out of prison, he had to go sit down and talk with the Afrikaner National Party leadership. He walked in with the entire high command of the ANC and the high command of Umkhonto we Sizwe, the armed wing. There had been an armed conflict with them for decades. And they sat down on one side and the National Party sat down on the other side. And when it was Mandela's turn to talk, with the world on his side now, with the sanctions that he thought up crippling the economy, with the armed struggle he was the author of having achieved near parity, with his enemy finally about to be forced to call elections, he finally gets to speak. You know what he said? In Afrikaans, he spent 20 minutes telling them their history, all their great achievements, their great poets, their great generals, all of the incredible things that they had suffered and that they had been able to achieve. For 20 minutes, he told them their story. He honored them. He took them to a higher place than their best politicians and leaders and poets could. And he said, with such a people, I'm sure an honorable resolution can be found. Now, it was 4 more years before there was a vote, but everybody in that room knew that it was over. Because the oppressed had somehow generated a genius and a capacity to imagine a future where everyone had a place of honor, including the oppressor. And once you have that in your mind, in America, where the Native Americans who were fighting to get the pipeline stopped, and those Appalachian coal miners, and those Rust Belt unemployed people, and the black kid who has dreams and is being left out, and the dreamers, and all in your mind have a place
of honor and dignity and respect, and that's true in your heart, then you can wait for other people to have their reaction without being so frustrated by their frustration that you get frustrated and everybody's just exponentially frustrated. I'm tough on you. I'm calling you to a different point. Your opponent will either be run over or won over. You have to win. Your opponent will be run over or won over. You have to win. You can't have these black kids out here getting shot by these police. You can't have the north part of your town being dumped on by all these pollutants and incinerators. You have to win. You can't have people running around here afraid that their mamas and daddies are going to be snatched out of their houses and sent, or them taken out and thrown into some country they don't even know. You have to win. You can't have gay kids and lesbian kids killing themselves. You can't have trans kids being made fun of. There's time out for that. You have to win. You have to win. But who are you going to be in the victory? See, that's your question. So when you have that, I'll run you over. But I'd rather have you won over. I'd rather have you won over. I'd rather have you be a part of the world that we're trying to build together, and I need you. I can't get there without you. If you don't get that politics, you're going to lose. But that politics, nobody can defeat.
Okay, you can clap for that. Since you just mentioned the folks holding it down in North Dakota on the pipeline, we have a question. What needs to happen for the water protectors to be recognized by American leadership?
There should be a massive surge of support as soon as the election is over to stop this pipeline. A massive surge of support. It should be every celebrity, every campus, every leader. It should be like Montgomery. This is the Montgomery for this generation. And they have to win. They have to win. Why wait? Because the media is not going to give you any attention for the next 2 weeks no matter what you do. So, I mean, the reality, I mean, listen, I'm as real as they come. The reality is, if you did the biggest protest right now against that pipeline, you would get no coverage because it's going to be all Trumpty-Dumpty all the time. So let Trumpty-Dumpty fall, and then
Another question having to do with the election, since you mentioned people, some who call Trumpty-Dumpty. Are you convinced that the Hillary Clinton today has changed enough from the Hillary Clinton who said super predators? Do you think she will bring effective change? Signed, a former Sanders supporter.
no. And I'll tell you why. That's not what presidents do. I'm going to tell you something. Y'all get on my nerves with this. I'm serious. Barack Obama just ruined y'all. I mean, y'all think the president's supposed to be like cool and inspiring and have integrity and what's wrong with y'all? Do y'all have history books? You need to stop this. This is silly. Presidents usually suck. They do. That's just, I mean, look at them. Look at the pictures. So, what are you talking about? If you want change, you need two things and not one. Your whole problem is that you haven't understood the dynamics of your own movement. You don't understand why you're winning. You don't even understand that you're winning. And so then you just like are miserable and make weird choices about voting. Look, you need two things to make change. You need a president who's willing to be moved. I didn't say a president who was leading your movement. I didn't say a president who's leading your movement. I said a president who's willing to be moved. And you need a movement capable of doing the moving. That's how you get change. So let's look at Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ, who signed all those civil rights bills and who signed all those anti-poverty bills. Before he was president, he was just some racist dude from Texas. But when he got to be president, he was willing to be moved. He had seen some stuff in Texas that got to him. So he was willing to be moved. He had worked as a volunteer with poor Latino kids. He was willing to be moved. But he got there by being an ardent segregationist. But you had a movement. Dr. King, Ella Jo Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, Bayard Rustin, who was willing to do the moving. And you got a bunch of stuff done. You look at FDR. He came in talking about deficit reduction, but he was willing to be moved. And then you had the labor movement in the streets that moved him. Look at Obama. Obama did nothing on criminal justice. He was willing to be moved. He black. So it wasn't a tough sell. He was willing to be moved, but it wasn't until Black Lives Matter. Immigration, it wasn't until the Dreamers. Tax the rich, it wasn't until Occupy. Keystone Pipeline, it wasn't until 350.org. You have to have a leader who's willing to be moved, but you still have to have a movement willing to do the moving. And now y'all so silly. Well, it doesn't matter. I don't care who, they're both terrible, and I just can't bring myself to vote for her. Is you crazy? I mean, just let me remind you, in 2000, you got a leader who was not willing to be moved. George W. Bush. When it was time to go to war, he was not willing to be moved. Black Lives Matter, you're so proud of yourselves. You know, you had rallies of hundreds, even thousands. We put 1 million people in the streets to stop George Bush's war. The biggest anti-war mobilization in the history of the world, and the war hadn't even started. You know what he said? He said, that's a focus group. And I'm not going to govern based on focus groups. We're going to war. If you have a leader who's not willing to be moved, you can put 1 million people in the streets and it won't matter. So it does matter who you elect. But the person you elect ain't going to do nothing until you beat them up and make them do it. You want to elect a piñata that you can get something out of. That's all. That's all.
Speaking of elections, we have this as our final question. I think this is one that you will be happy to speak to. Do you think that ex-felons should have the right to vote? Why or why not?
Just read them all.
Just read them all? Well, we only have that one and the next one. As a dreamer that walks this campus every day and had to pass a mural that stated "Build the Wall" before it was defaced, how do you begin a conversation with people that hate you? That was the last question. I only got a few. Well, then let me do my Oprah and get your question. All right, So while we're taking a drink break here, where do you see the country going in the next 20 years when it comes to including everyone, which I think helps us with that question about the bridge as well? Right now we have the divisiveness, the Republican and Conservative Party seems to have crested. How do you see our country, or a vision for our country where all are truly included rather than being so divided as we are today?
Should people who've been who are formerly incarcerated be allowed to vote? Yes. With regard to how we're going to include everybody, that's in your hands. It really is in your hands. It's unrealistic to think that you're going to have a multiracial, multi-faith, multi-gender, multi-sexuality, democratic republic with no, Saddam Hussein and kind of holding everybody together based on terror and force. Really, like having people democratically choose every time without a lot of friction. And with, traditional majorities and traditional constituencies having a lot of outsized power and, frankly, very little even awareness of the power they have. You just signed up for that by, being born here or coming here. There's a way to think about it, and I want to share how I think about it. And by the way, the reason I don't even deal with the question around formerly incarcerated people, did you notice that it's formerly incarcerated? Like, what damn sense does it make to say you committed a crime, and frankly, and by the way, just in case somebody hasn't noticed, you have a lot of people who are in jail for doing drugs. I'm sure nobody in here has ever done any drugs. Don't raise your hand. I went to Yale for law school. You got the giggles already. It's like, that's the worst kind of confession, dude. I went to Yale Law School. I saw more drugs done at Yale Law School than I've ever seen in any housing project or poor community by a factor of 1,000. So, people don't go to jail because they do drugs. They go to jail because they do drugs and they're poor, or they do drugs and they're black, or they do drugs and they're brown. But, so just get off of all that. And seriously, African-American kids and white kids do drugs at exactly the same rate. But African-American kids go to prison at 50% more. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. 6 times the rate. The same behavior, same age group. If you're white, you may not even get arrested. If you're black doing the same drugs, you're 6 times more likely to go to prison. So, and then afterwards, now you say, well, you're supposed to leave a physical prison and then come home to a social prison where you can't get a job, you can't get a student loan, you can't rent an apartment forever. And you can't vote in a lot of states. But we're a Christian nation. So, look, listen, if I buy a car and I finish paying for it, why am I still paying for it 50 years later? That's called a crooked, rigged system. But, this whole thing about the bridge and all the stuff you guys are going through, there's no good answer. There isn't. Should the students who wanted to build the bridge or build the wall up there been allowed to do that, they absolutely should. I would be afraid of an administration that told them that they couldn't, because an administration that says you can't write "build the wall" can also say you can't say Black Lives Matter. Okay, so I don't want that administration at all. Like, stay out of it. Let the students figure it out. Now, but when you put "build the wall" up there, you knew you were insulting people, and you knew you were being provocative. Well, that's what young people do. But then some other young people then are going to try to be provocative too. And so then here we are in this ping pong match of provocations. And hopefully people are learning things. But what I think I would pray for is not to have the administration come in on one side or the other. Obviously, maybe vandalism has some kind of thing attached to it, I don't know. But not to have the administration come down on one side or the other. But for the people who are deeply wounded by that kind of build a wall, lock them up, ban the Muslims, and all that kind of stuff, to get very good at pleading your case, to get very good at it, to get very good, like Tiffany, of making videos, to get very good of being able to stand up and say what needs to be said, even through your tears, and hopefully at some point through no tears. To get very good at persuading people. The good thing about democracy is you don't have to persuade everybody. It's 50% plus one. Get good at building power. Get good at doing your job as a citizen in a democracy that is yet unequal. Use the opportunity. And when you lose an argument, don't blame them for not listening well. Blame yourself for not being able to speak better. You say, well, that's not fair. They have privilege. So? The people that Dr. King went up against had more privilege than they do. The people that Susan B. Anthony went up against had more privilege than they do. Everybody you honor and respect had more privilege than they do. And they weren't crying about it. They used the challenge to get strong, to become unstoppable. They use the struggle, not to, oh my God, it's just so tough and I just can't. But to become useful, to become weapons and tools in the struggle for the liberation of all people. That's what these fights are for. You won't remember much about your college experience. You'll remember this. That's what it's about. Blind spots and sore spots. That's what an unequal society produces. People who are one up tend to have blind spots. People who are one down tend to have sore spots. If you ask a man on this campus, what's it like to be a man on this campus? They'll say, we have beer. Blind spots. Very little. I mean, not you guys, of course, but ask a woman, what's it like to be a woman on this campus? Well, these two professors hit on women. This fraternity is really not safe. You need your rape whistle if you're going to go from here to there at this time of night. Incredible amount of wisdom, understanding, insight, and pain. And don't take it personally. If you're white, oh my God, I feel terrible, I don't know what to do, please tell me. Just blind spots. Those are the good ones. The other ones, like, I don't know what you're talking about. If you're African American, Latino, I mean, you have dictionaries on top of dictionaries of racial literacy before you're 6th grade. Hey, I'll close with this one. Everybody in here, I bet, or almost everybody, has a certain form of unacknowledged privilege that you don't deal with. That's right. Every one of you, I bet. For instance, how many of you have really dealt with your privilege as neurotypicals? Oh. That's right. I'm sick of us not talking about it. All this neurotypical privilege. Now, if you have someone in your life who has autism, you know what I'm talking about. Autistic kids have to have meetings about you. You didn't even know that. You have to get ready to deal with all this neurotypical privilege. And they talk about you. And they tell them, they say, listen, here's the deal. If you're going to deal with these people, with neurotypical people, first of all, understand how they are. If a neurotypical person walks into a room and there's another neurotypical person, they will walk toward each other. No one knows why. But they will. And if you don't walk toward them, they take great offense. So if you see a neurotypical person, just walk over to them. We don't know why, but you have to. Number two, if two neurotypical people are talking and one of them is sad and makes a sad face, the other one will make a sad face too. Even if they're not sad. No one knows why. No one knows why. But that's how they are. And if you don't do it, they get mad. And furthermore, neurotypical people like to talk all the time to each other. And they expect you to talk. But you cannot ever, under any circumstances, talk to a neurotypical person about things that happen in the restroom and death. Because they get greatly offended and no one knows why. Now, have you ever thought of yourself as neurotypical? Because you're one up. Massive blind spot. Didn't even know you were neurotypical. And you're sitting there saying, but I'm just an individual. Why are you even raising this? I just want to be me. I feel judged and labeled. What can I do? Massive blind spot. Because you're one up. When you're one down, wisdom accumulates at the bottom. Insight accumulates at the bottom. Genius gets formed at the bottom. And pain. So you have responsibilities. If you're one up, shrink your blind spot. If you're one down, shrink your sore spot so you can be more effective. Heal. Get strong so you can be more effective. And then have empathy. Because guess what? You're all one down on something and you're all one up on something. I'm one down on race. I'm one up on gender, sexuality, education. Unless you're a left-handed lesbian of color in a wheelchair in a housing, you're one up on something. And even if you're a heterosexual, white, male, billionaire, blah, 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 you might be one down on hair. And at some point you were young. And all young people know more and feel more than they're given credit for. So we all are one up, we're all one down, we can all learn from both experiences. And if we shrink our blind spots and shrink our sore spots, we can bring everybody together. Thank you very much.